the board of pharmacy, it's like, oh, well, you can't make medical claims about this stuff. And I was like, I mean, I'm just stating like what we have for like published white papers and stuff. But again, it became a whole thing. And that's when I learned where, that's when I started to bump into a lot of like the old school business running this new age medicine type, and where it started. It got very messy very quick, where I started to see.
What's good, y'all? How y'all doing? We back. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Ohio TV. Of course, this is Will Baldwin over there. That is Bree, the Ebony Empress. We are glad to see you guys again. Today, we're going to be talking about culture advocacy, as we always do, entrepreneurship, and a little bit of actual legislative stuff today. Today's guest is a powerhouse in cannabis education, advocacy, and destigmatization. Sorry, I sometimes struggle saying the words. But he's a founder of EDTHC, education-based THC organization dedicated to helping people grow their own communities, understand their rights, and fight for the equitable policy in Ohio. He's also a board member of Civics Cannabis, Shaping the Future in Cannabis Legislation. Please welcome ED Eric White. White, is it Whited?
Whited, yes, sir.
Yeah, Whited. Sorry. Struggle get to that. There's a lot of big stuff in organizations, and sorry.
Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be on our show. We really appreciate it. We're honored to have you. Such a powerful force in the cannabis community here.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here today, and super excited to be talking to you guys. And been, I was at the launch event for you guys, and just watching everything you guys have been doing has been super inspiring. Having such a leading voice in this space that isn't afraid to kind of have all the different conversations. I feel like you guys have brought people from all different parts of the culture, from like the industry to people that are more representing, some of these people from Instagram. And then it's been awesome to watch the different voices you guys bring in, and the legitimacy that you guys bring to the conversation.
Thank you. That means so much.
I appreciate you, man.
Well, we have our famous question. Will, you got it?
Yes, I got you. Do you use cannabis? Why or why not?
Yes, I'm a pretty regular cannabis user. I'm actually relatively open with that with all my doctors right now, more so than ever, because I'm unmedicated for the first time in like 5 years from like anxiety and depression medication. So I use cannabis. I grow my own cannabis. I try to source the most like organic and healthy full spectrum cannabis I can, because it's I have an endocannabinoid system like most mammals, but mine's a little out of whack, so it helps regulate me.
Okay. Can you tell us about your personal journey and what sparked your passion for cannabis and advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. I started smoking cannabis, when I was in college, which is what kind of probably helped me realize that I wasn't going to do well being an engineer. My father was an engineer at Ohio State. My brother was an engineer at Ohio State. I was good at math and science, so like, why don't I be an engineer from Ohio State? I never really had done cannabis or drank a whole lot outside of that. So I at college started smoking that, and it, starts to open your mind to things a little bit. I wouldn't say that when I with engineering and then left Ohio State and went to Columbus State, I definitely believed that cannabis was the reason. I fell for a lot of the propaganda. That's why, the destigmatization, but also the depropagandization is also one of the main things I talk about, because I believe the propaganda that my generation and above us was, that we were fed. And so I kind of thought that was why I failed out of, college, and, had to go do the associate's route and go back. And so I ended up going down to Florida after I got my associate's degree. I went down to Florida to get my bachelor's degree. I got that in political science. I was getting mildly active in the political scene in Florida, which probably was about as well as you expected. It was nice. I was an intern with my Congresswoman, Kathy Castor, the 14th district. And so it was really cool. I helped her get connected with an environmental law professor I had to do this project there, which when that was the first time that I was like, oh, look, it's simple as just like, not always just talking about yourself, but being like, hey, I've watched my professor does this cool stuff and he has this cool thing. And I literally had brought in, I was an intern with my congresswoman, and I brought in chili to the, I was brought in chili that day because I brought in food every once in a while because I love to cook for people. And it just so happened I brought in chili in the day that the congresswoman was there. She's not normally in the office, they're in DC, doing their legislative work. They're not, that's why they have a staff at the office that fields the calls and does all that stuff. So she was there that day and she ate my chili. We were all sitting there with her actual like legislative aides and stuff like that. I'm just an intern. I just mentioned that conversation, and that's when I kind of saw how you can get, how just talking about the right things, the connecting thing was important, like that's when that really helped me see how it's not always just about being the most one, but it's about just connecting the right people, places already doing the work. So that was kind of helped me for activism. But then I graduated in 2019 with my political science degree, but started working non-politically, but just in the tech space. But 2020 happened, and I came back to Ohio, and it's hard to, Florida and Ohio, neither of those places are places that, like, if you pay attention to like politics, corruption, or fun places to be actively involved in the political space. So that was always like a later idea for me. I was like, I got the degree, but very quickly was like afraid of it all. So coming back to Ohio, I got COVID at the end of 2020, which didn't really mess with me respiratorily, but gave me debility with my immune system. And that's when I became a medical patient in Ohio. When I was in Florida, I thought the medical program was junk. I thought it was just a way to get weed for legal or whatever, but not really like an actual safe, respected thing. Because I was in Florida, there wasn't education down there. It was a lot of just business and propaganda.
Wild West, man.
Yeah.
Reading some of the laws and like.
Was early on then, and like so I missed all of the like 2016 to 2020 legislation thing with the medical stuff, but I came back as a medical patient, and I was like, I tried this migraine relief spray from Lighthouse Sciences, and I was like, oh wait, what the heck, like, because it's aromatic, so it's like, you put it here, you do a whole breathing exercise, and it has all of these different aromas on top of the natural cannabinoids and terpenes, and it's like, that was the first thing that gave me relief that wasn't the muscle relaxers, the other stuff, and I was like, that gave me respect to the medical stuff. And that's when I really dove into education. And I didn't really want to be an advocate, but it's kind of hard to, if you passionate about education and passionate about, well, it just wasn't where my focus was, right? Like I was educating in cannabis. That's what I wanted to, like, I just found cannabis and was working in that, and I was like, oh, this is great, and I just want to educate. But it was kind of like the advocacy was kind of forced upon me, right? Because I was like, they made it hard to educate. I made these little pamphlets, and like initially it was like, oh my, we're allowed to hand them out to the patients, because every single time you're talking to a patient, I would have to explain what an endocannabinoid system is and what terpenes are and why sativa and indica are more marketing terms and general directions rather than actual ways to classify what's going to work for you. And like, so I made a little pamphlet that like I'd actually used it to talk to my friends about weed, and I started handing it out and using it to people at the register. They asked if they could keep it. I was allowed to have it, but then all of a sudden the board of pharmacy, it's like, oh, well, you can't educate, you can't make medical claims about this stuff. And I was like, I mean, I'm just stating like what we have for like published white papers and stuff. But again, so it became a whole thing, and that's when I learned where, that's when I started to bump into a lot of like the old school business running this new age medicine type shit, and we're just started, because it got very messy very quick, where I started to see old Ohio money owning businesses and how the people at the top don't consume cannabis, actively don't consume it, were actively against it back in the day, but just see this as another money making opportunity. So that their decisions they make will never be in the interest of medical patients or the plant itself. It's always, and that's a result of capitalism. You can't be mad at them specifically, but like when the regulators, the Board of Pharmacy and now the Division of Cannabis Control, you see when they are overtly aggressive about what you can and can't say about the medical benefits of a medical program, you kind of have to become an advocate, especially when the legislature is actively saying the voters didn't know what they voted for. And then you go and watch. I started to I was like, oh, I know how this stuff works. I can go to the Ohio. I started watching what these guys are saying, watching what they had written in the past. And I'm like, no, they're not allowed to be the ones that talk about this. And that's what the talks about. Like that can't be the conversation about what Ohio's cannabis is. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what made me really hop into like advocacy and now activism, and then like that's what started advocacy, and having conversations with these guys in the hallways, actively just being like, hey, is this all you guys got? Is this what's happening? Are you willing to do this? And they're just like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, like I went to school for political science. I know how a framework works. I know what the Legislative Services Commission at the State House is and how to utilize that. And I was like, if I can get the community support something in here, we might actually like it. And watching the amount of people growing, and I mean, he was there the first time we were in the Senate hearing, because they was in the Senate Bill 56 happened in the Senate first, and then it went to the House with House Bill 160, and then Senate Bill 56 came out of the Senate into the House. So like Bree and me watched like the crowd grow and the volume and activism grow, and it's like, okay, it's not just a couple angry people, it's 2.2 million voters plus other people that support that too, you know. So it's like that's what kind of really inspired me to really just go full bore into the activism stuff, because it's not, it's one thing when it's just me and I'm angry, but it's angry and other people are validating that that's also, it's not just me being egotistical or me being about my own thing, but it's about all of us being disrespected, taken advantage of, that kind of stuff. That's what really hones it in.
You're one of the guys on the front lines, man. You're not afraid to be, very forceful and very vocal about what you want out of it. And that's you know what I'm saying? We need those people. You know what I'm saying? Because especially when it comes to legislative stuff, when it comes to laws like that, you do have to understand what you're talking about, of course. But at the same time, there is a certain wherewithal. That's why I said my brother's a lawyer. So like there's a certain wherewithal that you have to be able to stand your ground and be like, hey man, like look, this is what it does. This is how it helps us, and this is how we move forward. So yes, hey man, I'm glad. I appreciate you doing the work, dude. You basically answered all three of my questions, so I didn't have any more. So Bree, I'm gonna move on to you. You're on segment 3. That's you, girl.
I told you, I've been practicing the storyteller part, man. Like you set it up, like you guys were talking about the narrative. I was like, oh, you guys painted the picture. I can follow right along here. So.
Yeah. Words are important. Like I said, and that's why I said, like, we were talking before we started, and when we started, pretty much it was, filmmaking for me is a visual aspect where, like, I wrote back in the day, so I started with words and stuff like that, and that was a big thing for me. Yeah, you spoke beautifully, man. That was very good. That. Very.
Okay, well, moving on to your legislative and advocacy work in Ohio's legislative landscape, you recently broke down Ohio's state budget changes. For the average listener, what are the big takeaways we should know?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Thank you. I think that something that, like, that's something really fortunate that we kind of knew was happening the whole time. I don't want to say it that way, but we saw that when we were having the conversation right at the beginning, DeWine basically said to the legislative things and publicly, essentially, to the legislative people, that try to get something done here, but regardless, we're going to put it in the budget bill, because the budget bill was, as I think I'm going to put in my blog, like over 3,000 pages.
That's insane.
It's easy to bury things in there, right? So
who's supposed to be reading 3,000 pages?
Well, that's the thing. If you think that they're not, obviously objectively we know they don't have time for that. Now on top of that, and that also, to be fair, that's why they have legislative aides, that's why they have an office of assistants and all of that things. Now
so much,
yes, no one's actively reading that. Their aides are reading that, finding the key points, presenting that, but there's also like the Legislative Services Commission, the same one that I'm presenting my framework to.
It mind boggles me that they write these big ass bills.
That's the thing. They don't write bills. So that's how. So Legislative Service Commission is the one that writes the bills, right? So like, we go back and we watch like Senator Huffman, Steve Huffman, when he presented Senate Bill 56. Both Republicans and Democrats were asking him questions. Reflection on multiple things was, oh, I'm not really sure what's in there. I'd have to go back and look at it. Yeah. Now, what's wild to me is that he's a sponsor of that bill. And objectively, what that means is that he worked with the person who submitted a framework to the Legislative Services Commission, and the Legislative Services Commission takes the framework that we want this by doing this much of tax should do this, and then the ones make it as DEC, they make it the Ohio. And then that bill, that's when it becomes a bill and can go to a committee, and like that's when it receives its sponsors, right? So like objectively, as a sponsor of the bill, he should, if he hasn't read it front to back, his staff should have, and he should know the basic provisions of what's in the bill. And so when the sponsors of legislation are actively being that dodgy about it, it's like, of course we can't obviously expect them to even have any idea what's going on in some of these things, right? Like even federally, like I try to stay out of the federal stuff. I like cannabis right now because it makes me, I can impact what I'm working on. If I start getting on federally stuff, I feel like I'm just yelling at clouds. But
Mhm.
looking at some of that stuff, it's like we've seen, Marjorie Taylor Greene and other representatives where they'll say like, "Oh, I didn't know that was in the bill," because they're just like, "Yeah, my party was told. I was told to vote for it, right? The whip told me to vote for it." Like there's two majority whips and a minority whip, and whip's job is a Republican whip and Democratic whip, and their job is to whip up votes. So like when a new vote is going into committee or something like that, they're the ones that go on and be like, "Hey, are you voting on this?" And like tallying the votes before the votes are actually held in everybody in the chambers. Like the whip's job is to actually tally, keep track of all those things, and kind of steer some of where those conversations are going, which is like that stuff isn't common knowledge to a lot of people, but that's where a lot of like the gets buttered, and that's where a lot of like the power kind of stuff happens, right? So it's and then you have just I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that, but
we like the knowledge, though. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Did you drive the knowledge?
So back to your question, right? So some of the main jarring problems with it too was passed, and regardless of Senate Bill 56 failing, House Bill 160 failing, they have not actively enacted some of the things that we voted for, such as like, so we had an economic or social equity program that we had in there. We had level 3 cultivation. We had all of these other things in there. And so the budget, because I guess the reasoning for not paying these host communities part of their 36% of the 10% revenue was that there was legislation coming out soon, and that's going to actually allow the Department of Taxation to release the funds to the host communities and blah blah blah. But like that was but they haven't passed anything because clearly they're trying to mess with stuff. And so I think it's over like $16 million of revenue hasn't gone to all of these host communities, right? And so these communities that have put dispensaries in, not the ones that have voted against having it, but the ones who have actively said, no, let's build with these people, let's work with these people, let's invest in a future forward thinking, that they're supposed to get them. So not only have we not gotten some of the things that was in issue 2, but then they're actively taking things away from us, right? So like they removed the social equity, and that is one of the most egregious things, right? And their reasoning is that there's a Supreme Court case that has to do with language about giving out anything based on race. It has to do, that's where they started tying into the DEI, right? This is not, if you've read the bill, issue 2, and you've read the language that was supposed to go into 3780, it's not DEI the way that the program was set up, but because it used racial or ethnicity as one of the qualifiers, there's a Supreme Court case that would have made that basically defunct, and one of the legislators was basically saying that if we include that in here, the whole thing is defunct, and then it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and they're going to throw the whole thing out. So he was acting like a hero for saving it from that, but removing it from this. So that's, that removes the social equity program. And so now we're not taking care of, it's not now just the part about awarding those level 3 cultivation sites and other things based off of ethnicity, but now it's removed it based off of all of the other things about unemployment rate, about all of the different provisions that were in there for the different things that were supposed to help the community. It's supposed to help people that were arrested for minor possession charges in the past. They were supposed to have first right on these level 3 cultivation things, right? It was literally 2.2 million people voted to have a way for the legacy people who have been doing this before the government caught up and stopped lying to us, that they were supposed to have a chance first based on the program we voted on. So that was just taken out completely. With that, they were very bold and just took away the entirety of the tax breakdown, right? There was 5 different pillars of the tax breakdown of where that 10% excise tax, or as Stephen Huff, sponsor of the bill, likes to call exercise tax, the excise tax, that means an excise is something that they consider like a sinful thing, like drinking tobacco, like that kind of stuff. So the marijuana is an excise thing. If you're doing it as an adult thing, it's a bad thing. So that's where they put the 10% tax on, but that's fine. We broke it down into 5 different things. 36% was for the host community fund. Part of it was a social equity program. It was 5 different pillars in that. That was removed entirely, right? So now the entire, except for that 36% for the host communities, which I don't even remember how many testimonies I heard, including myself and many of the other activists and all of the people that I worked with were bringing up. These communities included that money in there. Were you able to, what do you mean you're not going to give it? So we were able to get that 36%, but the remaining 64% of the budget, or that 64% taxes, is now going to state's general revenue fund for, quote, the needs of the state. Part of those needs of the state, according to the budget, is a police program. So part of the money of the part, whenever you're buying money from the DCC, when you're spending your money on weed in the DCC in Ohio, is part of that tax that's going on there. If it's adult, is now going to be stuff. Like that's what they put in the budget. That's what it's not put a thing in there about education about overuse of marijuana. There's nothing in there, no provisions in there about education, about like correction of like the lies of the war on drugs, all of the false propaganda, or all the actual medical uses, or actual a clear explanation of how we can even do legal marketing in this. No, but there is a provision in there for a program to talk. They even took out the funding for the addiction recovery services program. That was like a small portion of the tax thing. That's not in there, but there's going to be money to make new propaganda about why overusing marijuana is bad.
See, and that's crazy, because now you guys are on a different perspective where like you guys are voting to say yes for it, and they're still forcing it away from you guys.
Yeah.
See, I live in Kentucky, so we're like fresh, we're new, we're still learning like how to actually navigate, and that's one of the things I want to get deeper into is being an advocate for weed here, medicinal. But like it sounds like now it's like they're just doing all the pushback, and like I said, everything's up in the air. You can't really staple down what you need to do, because even though you're trying to speak on it, voicing your opinions, they're still taking it away from you regardless.
Or it passed out of the Senate committee, because a bill, Senate committee, Senate floor, House committee, House floor. When it initially hit the Senate and before it went out of committee, there was 5 proponents and 30 opponents. And make any changes in committee and voted it out with 0 changes. To your point exactly, it's like we did it the way you asked. We used the system. We did all the things you asked, and then you just literally ignored the voices. Like that's why, if you watch my 3 testimonies, you can watch the vibe change. I go from wearing like my gray suit with like the purple tie that I got stuff, and I was like, trying to be as a professional education as I can. I was like, well, that felt like a slap in the face. I wore all black with a little white tie, kind of being like, all right, they're writing a kill bill to the industry, so I'm gonna dress for a funeral. And then the last one, I was like, all right, man, like Ohio uses a system which is generally adversive to activists and to people speaking, not even activists, but regular people speaking up, because they literally say that we have a bi-weekly committee system. So basically the committee hearings happen on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays most of the time, and not until the Friday do they post a schedule for the next week of what bills they're going to be hearing. And so if you want to be a proponent or an opponent of legislation, you either have to know ahead of time by having friends in the state house when exactly they're going to hear the bills, which is basically chosen by the committee chairperson. You either have to know that, or you have to wait around like every other the people, the legislative review people and stuff like that. They don't know until Friday when they get the same emails, figuring out what the schedule is. So like, you're a working person. How easy is it to get an email on Friday afternoon saying, hey, this bill is going to be heard on Wednesday at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. How easy is it to get off work, write a testimony, submit that testimony, get down to the part of Columbus you may not be familiar with, find parking, get in there, and you have to take the whole day off. Like that's not easy for the average person.
Yeah.
And so when you do all that, and there's 30 plus of us come out and you still don't add any changes, it's like, how do you not expect people to start working outside of the system you've built?
Yeah, it's very intimidating going down there.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, it almost feels intentional, which is why the last time I was wearing I was wearing gym shorts. I was wearing these knee-high socks that had pit bulls and pot leaves on it, and my little white button-up shirt that had pot leaves all over it. My mom got me the socks, my dad got me the shirt, and like they both lived, like they were born into the 60s and went through these days. They lived through the war on drugs. They heard a lot of propaganda. My mom's not really used cannabis much ever in her life. Like she hasn't ever. I think she said, she was like one of those people. It's like, oh, I used edibles once when I was, in college and hated it, so never. And like, she works for the public media relations for the Delaware County Sheriff. She's been that's not something that she's seen what as a medical patient, she's learned and respected that stuff. And now they support that this is what I'm doing. Right. And so that was part of why I didn't tell that story there, but that's part of why I wore that in there. It's like, if my parents who went through that can change their mind, I think you guys can. Your job to represent the will of people who have changed their mind, kind of trying to, just bring that conversation back to them, but kind of also like you're making me do this for the 3rd time. You're making me come down here and talk to you guys about this. I'm not dressing up for you this time. I'm coming in with my joints in my pocket and my outfit that I like to get. in, and I'm going to come in because I don't want to be here, but you guys are you've brought this to us. You're spitting in our faces, and you turn the other cheek, but that's only the one time, and then after that you have to retaliate. You have to work hard. You have to do something to stop what they're doing.
Yeah.
For
See,
sure.
and what's crazy? So like more on the activist term, the last podcast that we had, was it Lux Leaf? That's what her brand was starting as, and she's fresh. She's at the very front of it. And her dream was to make sure that she could empower, have a brand that she can empower and really represent for women in the brand, or just being a professional in the brand. And here we are, you preface to this now. Here we are in this podcast, and my guy here is out here in legislative, session, just trying to fight and do as much as he can as a professional. You know what I'm saying? So it's cool that we've gotten this spectrum. I just wanted to tie it back to that because
That's awesome.
it's a good perspective. You know what I'm saying? Everybody in this industry has some type of character where the only thing we want to break is the stigmatism. And our goal here, like here at Gangs Media, is conversation saves the nation. So like it's a very good example of how it's happening.
Yeah, that's
definitely.
awesome.
And Eric is on fire for cannabis.
Yes.
Love that.
I do love to burn cannabis. What can I say?
Also that. Okay, so tell us about the legislative framework you're drafting. What would a proper cannabis program for Ohio look like in your eyes?
Yeah, thank you. That's I really appreciate all of the direct questions here. This is super fun to be on. That's what I said. I really enjoyed your guys' interviews, what you've brought to this space. I think there's been a lot of good conversations in the state lately, but you guys bring a very focused and it feels very driven conversations to drive these stuff. So I really appreciate that question there. I
Thank you.
was able to I have put out a legislative framework on my website and a link onto the Google Doc where people can actively comment and view it and make submissions to make changes to that. But essentially what that is at the end of it, I am going to submit that to the Legislative Services Commission, and then I'm seeking, and I have verbal agreement for a Democrat to be a sponsor, and I have a couple meetings with Republican representatives in the next 6 to 8 weeks to there's a few that are interested because I'm working with people in the hemp space that have, if we're being honest, the Senate Bill 56, the last time they tried to vote on it before it went to the recess, the last time they tried to squeeze a vote through right before the last day, the reason that vote didn't happen is because of a group of Republican representatives who are very informed and impassioned now because of their information about hemp. Because cannabis is right, it is, these things are the same. One and the same. It is the definitions come down to simply and legislation, right? Because it depends even what you're saying on that, because that's the problem with having this making it an illicit substance and calling it this conversation, is that we have such a muddied conversation, and when it comes down to it, cannabis is a plant that has cannabinoids, and legislatively we've decided to call it hemp if it doesn't contain THC. Unless it contains THCA, then it's intoxicating hemp. But that's all cannabis. Marijuana is what a lot of people have now decided we shouldn't call it for medicinal use. And I went back and forth on that because I went and researched about, a lot of people claimed it was used racially and a lot of stuff like that. But the research on that is not as, I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. We have multiple programs in the country. For me, it doesn't seem beneficial to further. We all need to, if we're going to get into the weeds about it legislatively, because of the federal government doing things differently than state governments, then it matters the exact word used. So I'd prefer if we didn't have to use marijuana versus hemp versus cannabis, but if we're going to have one that's federally legal, one that's federally not, and we have a program built about the use of that, then we should probably be specific. So that's kind of where I've looked at that. So that's why I started my framework with just definitions, right? So breaking down the difference between cannabis, marijuana, hemp, intoxicating hemp, what people mean when they say federally compliant and stuff like that, right? So that the idea there is that even if this is ever heard in the halls of the State House, that at least they have a document that was gone through the Legislative Services Commission and is sat on the desk of all of them that tells them this stuff. Not some activist paperwork, but it's something that has gone through their system and it sits on their desk that tells them that, right? So that's my goal.
Thank you for trying to educate the government.
Yeah.
Thank you. Part of the request in here is also that there is actually an education system for them as well down the road, because to that point, we vote every 2 years on new representatives. So like, no matter how much I try to educate these guys in 2026, new ones are going to be elected, and so like they're going to need education too, right? And so
and that's the lack of it. Like you gotta know what you're talking about if you're gonna make laws on it, man. Like you most definitely gotta know.
It's frustrating because that's the problem, is we objectively know they can't know everything. They can't have all of that, but the whole point of a democracy, the whole point of having representatives is that, and the whole point of having testimonies is that you ask, they're like, hey, wow, I'm actually a representative that's working on a bill about corruption. I'm working on a bill about schools, and I'm working on a bill about roads, and I'm working on a bill about this and that. They can't objectively know everything in each of those, but that's why they have their aides, but also that's why they hold testimony, so that they can be educated by experts, right? And so again, to your point earlier, it's like when they deny that, that's so frustrating, because it's like, when you're ignoring using the systems we're supposed to use, what do you expect us to do? Just sit around and be? And that's not, America wasn't built on that. America was built on, when we're ignored legislatively, we do other things and we make action. So like, that's why I wrote the framework. And like, the idea with the framework now is I have, I think, 12 sections in here now, and each of those sections is just on all of the different things. I kind of went back to issue 2, because I'm not doing anything new in the way of, I'm not creating anything that hasn't already been asked for by a majority of voters in this state, right? And also pay stakeholders, just consumers in the program that I've talked to on a daily basis, that I've talked to throughout my time in this program and my time doing what I'm doing now. Like, so some of the biggest things for me, are to take it back to the social equity, rather than getting in a back and argument and trying to join the culture war about DEI with the Republicans in the state house. I've just decided to call mine economic equity. So, I went through the language and took out the parts that said things about ethnicity and included things about the same things about unemployment, about incarceration, and economic disadvantage, to include membership in any disability status or long-term residence in an area of high unemployment, right? So like, if that's your problem, why didn't we just take that word out? Why did you strike the whole program? Right? Like, that's what's so offensive. So economic equity is at the core back of that, right? But then, expungement, we've still gone back and forth time and again, even though we voted for expungement for anybody who was arrested for minor possession charges in the past. That's not happened. Taxes, I don't find anybody in their right mind who voted for a thing that had a 10%, like, there's an excise tax. I understand that the people don't vote on specific tax dollars, but when we're creating a specific program and we're setting a subset of taxes on that, it's not, there is precedent to have specific tax breakdowns for that. So put the taxes back in, put the expungement, actually do what we asked for. The economic equity would reestablish that lose level 3 cultivators, right? So some of the, I guess, the newer things I would say is a firm recognition of harm reduction in cannabis usage, right? Including banning synthetics, free and public testing for cannabis contaminants, microbials, pests. If there's a fentanyl crisis with cannabis, give us a place to test it at this. Like, let me take it to the library, take it to somewhere else, and drop it off a nug and get a test back in 2 days to let me know if it's contaminated with fentanyl. If that's what you're really worried about, if we're trying to fix that, give us a way to test that. But no, that's a scare tactic. It's not something they actually want to provide to us. But again, I'm going to ask for that. I'm going to ask for testing for everybody. Anybody to be able to pay any of these labs to test their home grow if they want. I'm not asking them to give us that for free, but if you want a full panel testing, you want to know what kind of cannabinoids, terpenes, what you got in there, you should be able to pay a private company to do that.
Yeah.
The companies aren't allowed to. The Dave companies have written to the CC home grow, because I wanted to see how much CBN my 18 weeks of flower stuff had that got snowed on 3 times and had a bunch of purple, orange, amber trichomes, and I was like, I wanted to get that tested. They wanted to test it for me. The DCC allow that. So it's like, I just want public access to testing, right?
That's crazy.
That's really crazy.
It's
I didn't know they were that restrictive though. Like I said, I'm from Kentucky, so I didn't know that the DC are like super restrictive.
Going to be transferred about was money. DC now becomes a board of regulators underneath the Department of Commerce. Now is the Division of Cannabis Control. So it's like a regulator group underneath a larger group that sits in the executive branch, and they're made up of a lot of members of the community that are very uninformed about cannabis. Like the guy that runs the DCC, Jim Canepa, had a lot of things to do with why all of Ohio's liquor, if you go to a liquor store in Ohio, the liquor is not owned by the liquor store. It is owned they are like they are selling it for the state, but liquor is not
That's what
owned.
I was thinking, that the DCC guy was from the
That's the same
alcohol
guy who made that the
side.
thing in Ohio, right?
Yeah.
The same guy who calls them nubs and not nugs, right? Like this guy, the same guy who said he does not care about, people's, like, he does not care about the workers. He does not care about these people who have, like, people who have been hired by a company, had the licensing set up, but they don't want to recognize that. He said he doesn't care about those people. He said he doesn't care about the patient. These things are things that people have confidence. I'm not going to put names out there, but they're in meetings. They're at the DCC board, and that's OCAN's a whole nother can of worms. I probably part of why I lost my job was because I spoke out against this group, and they're not a group of regulators. They are not a government group. They are a private 909. If you want to get into what kind of 501c3 and nonprofit, whatever, they're a 909. They're basically a trade group, and they are made up of a lot of lab license holders and other financially invested people in Ohio's cannabis community, and they are very tied into DCC. Many people that are on the board of OCAN are also connected to the DCC. So you have a private group connected with the group of overreaching regulators who are then seeing all of these bills, Senate Bill 56, House Bill 160, which are spitting in the face of what people voted on. So of course they're going to feel compelled to kind of just control a program however they want. I tried working in that program for 2 years. I lost my job in a couple different places, either trying to stand up for, there's a reason I have a workers' rights on here. I don't know if you guys paying attention to what's going on in Michigan. There's been a really good protest going on out there for 2 weeks now. They tried to unionize, just like many times in Ohio where companies tried to unionize, and then right before the people voted to unionize, they were all fired. The place was sold out from under them, or like we need workers protections, right? Like that is a clear thing. So that's another thing that's in here. I'm not saying that the DCC are a bunch of criminals. I'm saying there might be some really corrupt people that work there. I'm not saying that OCAN doesn't need to exist. I'm saying that they have actively denied and disrespected the people voted for them. People spent their money to help those organizations stay around for the last 5 to 8 years. And so like we, the consumers, we, the people, like are pissed off, respected. And when you're actively using your money to push against what we're supporting, like that's, what do you mean?
Yeah, because right now it's against the interest. Like you're not, like we voted for it, and there's nothing being done to help us at all. Like there's nothing.
And it's exactly so. Workers' patients' rights, harm reductions, and then I do have federal compliance and industrial hemp program stuff in there too, right? Because I really want to make this a better conversation about how like THCA, that federally compliant flower, is this THCA is if you look at the COAs of the stuff you buy at dispensaries, it's the same THCA that's in all that stuff. THCA becomes THC delta 9 once it hits 450 degrees, right? Like once it starts lower at 450 is where you get the best interaction, but it starts at a lower temperature. I think at 250 if you do it time to be but it is THCA is just the acid precursor to delta 9, but that is so when you're growing this THC hemp, that is basically just at a certain time in the grow, the flower is going to start to deep a little bit into delta 9 because it's sat out in the sun, it's sat out in the tent for so long. So basically the main difference between THCA and delta 9 flower is when you chop it and what the testing says then. Right? But like that is what has defined this federal program versus this other stuff. And it's like, we could technically have, through the industrial hemp, for the USDA and the FDA's hemp program, we could technically have farmers growing fields of THCA hemp per their regulations, per the USDA, per the FDA. And then those farmers could then sell that biomass to process. They can make all of these other, like, actually have terpenes from other stuff. Like, they could produce THCA, which then when is processed, if you introduce it to heat, becomes delta 9, just like every other concentrate. You could have industrial hemp farmers, you could have intoxicating, they could be contributing to Ohio's program through the process. Right? We wouldn't even have to have our cultivators do that. That's probably not going to happen because then all the cultivators are going to be mad that they can't also grow outside. But then that opens up a better question of why can't they grow outside? It's way more fuel efficient. It's way more better for the environment. Like when you're not doing all this air control and this light and all this other stuff, when the sun is going to do it way better anyway, right? So like there's so many reasons why we should. So making it basically that our industrial hemp program matches USDA and FDA compliance, which they've basically already done, but then just matching that language into, I'm not asking dispensaries to do the intoxicating hemp, right? Like the DCC can still control all of the cannabis controlled in the dispensaries. I'm just saying that part of this is asking for hemp cultivators to be able to sell licensed, tested THCA biomass to cultivators or to processors.
You just want to verify, like the testing is just like a verification that the weed is good.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like just kind of like how, like, if you ever bought a vape and there's a QR code, you can scan
Yep.
QR code on the vape and it gives you the code and it shows a little picture to tell you that it's verified.
Yep.
It's the same thing.
Yep. And that's the COA, right? And like you can, every one of the dispensaries should have those. I'm part of ours is with remediation is to ask any product that has been remediated, which is radiation treatment to get rid of mold or microbial life forms, to have that on the COA. It is not currently on the COA that is seen by the public right now in Ohio, but like there is stuff sold at gas stations which doesn't always have a way, and there's stuff sold at hemp shops that doesn't always have a COA. There's a difference between a corner store that has also just looked to throw another item on the shelves, which capitalism, do what you got to do. But like there's a difference between what they're selling, which can be very full of synthetics, and especially the vapes and the edibles and the other stuff,
versus, I just had this convo with a customer
going
today.
to like there are and there's dispensaries, but there's also federally compliant hemp dispensaries where everything in has a COA. Like I'm meeting some Republican lawmakers at the end of this month, the beginning of October. I'm meeting a couple Republican lawmakers at this guy's federally compliant hemp facility, so we can show that they can scan every package and have a COA that has more information than what you get from if you go and shop at the programs in the DCC. And like it's not to say that the weed is safer in one or the other. It's just saying that there's the better transparency in one versus the other. But that federally compliant hemp dispensary is not the same thing as a gas station or a corner store or a hemp shop just selling stuff, because a lot of those are the ones that get busted for selling just regular old stuff from Michigan or vapes that they purchase from China that do have additives in them. Like that's why we need testing, and that's why we need I don't want regulation, but I want to have honesty and I want to have transparency.
I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand. Like we've had down in Athens, their big thing is pushing like craft cannabis, like pure. Like we want to make sure there's a craft experience built around it. Kind of how like I say, I all related to Kentucky and bourbon. Kind of the same thing. Sorry, my cat's over here. she's smiling today. So essentially it's like having that experience to be able to relate and actually like being able to keep it pure, keep it clean, keep it simple, not have too much over it, but I still have the wherewithal things to be able to verify it, make sure it's good. I know about it because I can learn through the testing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Athens is amazing, man. Cool.
Every time I go down there, it's like objectively according to traditional measures of wealth, Athens County and Meigs County are two of the poorest counties in Ohio, right? But like if you measure like richness in like food or culture or cannabis or
it's great.
people, it's one of the richest places you go, and every time you leave your arms are full, whether it's somebody's homegrown potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, whether it's their homegrown cannabis, whether it's just some fun stories about where you went to, right? Like
that is so true.
And that's like and the economic equity program, those things, that's supposed to help communities like Athens, like Meigs County, like that's supposed to help those type of people, right? So like that's why we need all of the things we voted for, and then so that's why we're asking for more.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Moving on, you use the word depropagandization.
Yeah.
One myth or piece of propaganda about cannabis that still frustrates you the most, and what myths are you most passionate about debunking?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Yeah, so depropagandization is, if you look it up, like technically not a word, but yeah, it's like that's some 1984 stuff. So like, why would propagandization is like the act of like using it's propagating information. You propagate a plant, right?
Yes.
So like propaganda is doing that through like visual or written means and through like community and through the public. So like propaganda doesn't have to be done by a federal government. It's just like that is like organized information that comes out to explain a thing and propagates itself, that spreads out and becomes the accepted conversation. Of course, depropagandization is not a word because that's just, you're basically just saying like, well, you're just spreading your own propaganda, but like call it that because I think it's very important to talk about how it's been propagated by the federal government, by these state governments, by authority for so long. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like it adds a little bit of an element. I could just say like, also it doesn't look good if you put part of your business as propagandization or propaganda as part of your business. And so again, I want to be very clear. Words are important to me, so that's why I do it. So thank you for that.
Privatizing almost like they took all the business and privatized it for themselves, but didn't really want to take the rest of the stuff.
Exactly. So it's all about the words matter. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's greed, and so
that's the name of the game, I guess. It seems.
Yeah.
Greed.
So
That's
I
what it
think
is.
one of the things that I think one of the bigger bits of propaganda would just be that it is so it is not a stimulant. That's not propaganda, but it is clearly I guess one of the biggest bits of propaganda is that it is unsafe, right?
Right.
Cannabis is not unsafe. Cannabis is safe. It's just flat out like there's just no way what's about it. Like, is it good for people under the age of 18 or people of 25 to consume unless there's very specific, but like it doesn't mean it's not safe. Like it is, people, it does not drastically harm. It's not there needs to be better education, is that like before you're 25 years old, before your neuroplasticity has, your brain is fully cooked, when you're still forming your neural pathways and your receptors are still balancing out, it's not good to do alcohol or mushrooms or cannabis or any of these things that do end up being super helpful for people later at some way, shape, or form. It's about letting your brain cook first before you add in those extra additives, right? And like I wish that was the conversation that it was. Not that those things are going to kill you if you do it, not that it's the awful thing, but just that like, hey, like most of what you're using those things for are things you can just do right now because you're young and your brain is just does all the stuff already. So like don't worry about using that yet. You can use it when you need it. Like that would have been a whole different conversation if we taught our kids that. Like it's not some devil thing. And so that's where it comes from for me. Like the fact that it's a Schedule 1 drug is asinine. Now should it be a Schedule 3 drug? No, because a Schedule 3 drug implies that we need to have research or we need evidence that it's safe for use medicinally. We have medical programs all over the country, private corporation way to off of it. So let's myth it's unsafe, and that's not even if it's propaganda because it's a Schedule 1 safe for regulating your body, right? Like that is something that it is good for. So what was the second part of the question?
Second part of the question was, and what myths are you most passionate about debunking? I guess you're saying that would be, is that your
that was, I guess, sort of, but I guess more the myths are just like it's some of the.
I was going to say a myth. One myth that it's addictive.
Yes, right. So it is not like, so anything, you can become addicted to anything, right? If something can become addicting, your body can become, there are some signs of withdrawal issues if you become a regular cannabis, if you become dependent on cannabis, your body's like, your receptors are used to receiving a certain amount of stimulation, amount of that thing, your body can become dependent on that and you can have some withdrawal symptoms, but it is not inherently addictive. There is not something in the drug that inherently has a receptor or has an activation system in your body that causes you to need more of it, right? That's typically what an addicting thing is, where it activates a system and it literally starts to have a push-pull system with your dopamine or with other parts of your body that literally tell you, I need that. Like cannabis do that. You can become emotionally addicted to where you're like, man, I can't even get out of bed if I use this stuff. That's also like maybe you are dependent on it because you have severe pain and debilitation and you are dependent on using cannabis for pain relief to get out of bed. So maybe that's dependence and not addiction, right? So that's why harm reduction is important to me, and having that conversation about it as an exit drug. It's not an entry drug. The only thing it's an entry to is to questioning authority, is to self-reliance, is to healing yourself a little bit on your own and not relying on other people to do it for you and having a little bit more empathy. That's what it's an entry to, but it is an exit drug for a lot of people when it comes to narcotics, when it comes to painkillers, when it comes to alcohol. So like that is a conversation we need to have more. So that's the other probably biggest myth, is that it is an entry drug or is a gateway drug. It is literally an exit drug, and a lot of addiction specialists and harm reduction people cite it as such. And we've had a medical state, so we can at least acknowledge use as that.
Yeah, man. Hey, because all we doing is smoking to chill. What are we gonna do?
Literally told, like, I
We
told
just-
them as such, like one time when I went into the state
I
house, I
know.
was like, hey, like I consumed this many milligrams of cannabis today because like if I wasn't, I'd probably be more angry in the way I'm speaking at you. Now, my mom was like, oh, it's because you're angry. I was like, no, I'm going to be angry. I'm going to want to jump over that podium and like scream in their faces about how can you disrespect us? How can you do these to these communities and such? Like,
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
very frustrating. It
well,
really
sometimes we are
is.
just
And
it
needing
it's
to
gets really
chill
rough.
so that
It
we can
does.
have
It
a
gets
good
frustrating.
conversation.
Yeah.
it really is
Yeah.
frustrating, honestly.
Yeah.
I honestly can't believe it, but I guess that's only because cannabis is like the first thing that I've like really zeroed in on like politics for
Yeah.
myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a lot of people, right? And that's
Yeah.
helped me form this system. Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off there. I feel so strongly about that because that's what brought me. I didn't plan on getting into my or activism and I felt like I had done some other things, but then cannabis was like, well, they're coming after that. Well, I have the skills to do this. I was just hoping.
You
Yeah.
Went and like grabbed my I went and grabbed my little wizard staff, which I wanted to show off at some point here. I grew this little guy here, so I've been planning. I'm thinking I'm gonna take this one into the state house next time because
oh my
this
god,
is
do
literally
it.
grown out of weed. That is like the root ball there. I did like epoxy on it, and then that's
That's
like obviously
legit.
hemp there. So it's like obviously gonna stay on there, but I want it to look kind of like so like. But I heard the call and I was like, all right, we gotta go. Just like I gotta I didn't want to get those tools out of the shed just yet. I was hoping I had some more time to just do some other stuff. But like, if you're gonna come after this stuff, I know a lot of really good people that have a lot of really good things to say, and you're trying to hurt them right now. And if I know how to help them say it a little bit louder or a little bit more the way you're gonna hear it, you're gonna hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
I appreciate you and all of the work that you've done, to be a
Yes.
voice, to inspire other people, to come out and speak and to just take that time to do all of the research for everybody, reading all of the bills and stuff, like, and coming
Yeah.
out and educating. That's so important. Yeah.
Thank
Very
you,
much.
and thank you guys for
Just a heads
amplifying
up.
myself and all the other voices.
We are getting close to time. I think we got about 5 minutes left. I would like to carry on this conversation, so I would say that we put a pin in it and do a part two. Maybe
That's
we
a
should,
great idea.
because this is a very this is for me. I've learned a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Kind of understanding of structures of bills, of like understanding that how you're pushing for different things in different parts of the bill, stuff like that. So I most definitely would like to hear more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I will just wrap it up. We'll close it out, and then, like I said, we'll do a part two. We'll set another day up and can continue this. Let's do that.
That's great.
I love that. Eric, tell the viewers how they can support you, where they can
Yes.
find you,
Yeah.
Yes.
what
Yeah.
you're like, what's coming up, like, give it
See if
to
I got
us.
this little bag right here. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm working on a few different things right now. Getting the legislative framework and going was, a really good little rolling thing for me. But the best way to find it, because especially with social media being what it is ebthc. That's my website. It will take you to all the different sections if you want to look at the blog, if you want a guide, if you want other resources, if you want to look at the framework. All the links are right there at the landing page. But other than that, like as far as support, like there's there's a lot of different things that people can be doing right now. Like right now we're actively starting like a town hall series
Mhm.
October 5th, 16th, and then 2 dates in November as well. We're going to be meeting at public libraries for people to come in. We'll have some piano playing, we'll have some coffee and tea. We'll have a panel moderated by like an independent moderator fielding questions to have these conversations in public, right? Because like we're inviting all of the state house
I love
representatives and
that.
senators have been invited to, especially like the ones that have committees, so that they can hear from the public, that they can get what's now. We are forming the panel for each of those. We already have the ACLU and some other people from the community committed to coming into the first one, as well as some people from Ohio's traditional space. So like we really want to bring the conversation in from everybody, right? So like
Good.
checking out those town halls through my page, Civics Cannabis, Ohio Normal, you can sign up for them. Normal National's been doing cannabis advocacy and legislative work for decades. Soon enough, I'm going to be launching. I've been doing a lot of different. I told you about that little educational pamphlet I got in trouble for back in the day. Like I've turned one of that into a sticker. I've worked with a local artist. I've got like a sticker here that's like now got all of that education on there, right? So it talks about all of the different. I'm going to be doing like a custom. We're going to be doing like a custom. We're going to be doing like a custom hoodie and custom T-shirts on that later on too. Like we're doing all kinds of different stuff here. So I'm going to be putting out some stickers. Working with a local artist, Chocolate Rose Art. She's been doing a lot of these different little stickers and art with me. I'm working with Ohio OC Skills, Ohio Cannabis, Ohio doing all kinds of like leather stuff. I'm working with High Science, get some like swag and stuff like that out. So I'm going to be putting out some different ways for people if they want that kind of like stuff to like support me that way. But like mostly it's just being active, being involved, paying attention to this stuff. If you got the finances, I got a Patreon because you know we're in that day and age we got to do things independently. I'm launching a Substack soon so that I can actively write things and read those. People can subscribe if they want to learn more. So like I want my basic education to be out there for people, but I do want to have ways if you have the means to support financially. I'm starting to put those ways out there because I did lose my job for like the second or third time in the cannabis industry for a loud outspoken voice. So I got to figure out how to do it myself now.
Yeah. I hear you. All right, man. Well, we appreciate you, dude. And like I said, we're most definitely coming back and wrapping this up. So, because we got a couple more questions, and I most definitely want to hear your perspective because it's been really good so far. Make sure you guys check this man out, follow his stuff, look for his collabs on High Science. Make sure you check our collabs out on High Science. We work with Will's a great dude. I believe his name is Will, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So another Will. Great.
Creations, High Science, there's so much cool, like I said, Chocolate Rose Art, there's so much cool stuff happening right here in Ohio's community, and we all want to support each other, right? Like that's the coolest part. Like so many of these people were at your guys' media launch party where like some of this like Skills literally like saw my pamphlets because I used them to launch, like these were little folded zines at that time. And he had seen them and was like, I want to make a t-shirt out of that, bro. You know what I mean?
That's
so
a
like
smart idea because you'll just be wearing that, and
that's what I was saying. I'm like, no,
what is that?
Like, for me, when I saw what Ohio's community was, that's when like I'd already been part of this community, but that's when like the community started to be like, hey, bro, like, I've been part of it for a while, but that's when I really started to feel a different level. Like when you provide, they uplift, and you can just do that back and forth. It's really awesome.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys. You guys have a great night.
Appreciate it.
Take it easy, guys.
Have a good one.
You.